only thing between me and them, I think, was like one Georgian cop. You know, he parked his car across the street, and that was the protection that we had. And if the Russians had decided to come to the capital, then we were I don't know what I would do. It was bad. We mostly just drank. What are you going to do? I mean, you can't evacuate a city of 1 million people, so you're just going to hang and drink. I mean, I got an American passport and a visa. I'll probably get through all right. So anyway, that's Georgia. You can also see Kazakhstan and Mongolia, and also Kyrgyz Republic, Kyrgyzstan, doing reasonably well. And that also is confirmed by other independent sources. Some of the post-Soviet republics that are doing relatively well. I don't have the worst of the worst. I don't have Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. If I did, I know they'd be red still. Okay. So you get an idea. It's always nice to look at Chile and Argentina. There's a real contrast. I gave a talk almost exactly like this a few months ago to a bunch of businessmen, and one of them worked for Home Depot, and he says, "Man, I wish I'd seen that picture before we built 7 Home Depots in Argentina and had to close all of them within 2 years. We should have put our money into Chile." I said, "Well, if you'd asked me, that's what I would have told you to do." This is not investment advice, but I think that's a real great contrast down there, Chile and Argentina. Of course, Chileans and Argentinians hate each other, so sorry if you're Argentinians. Yes, sir?
I can't see Central America. What's the color for that?
It's actually green and blue. Costa Rica is bluish, it's the highest. I think Panama is blue now too. Honduras is blue, but I'm not real happy with that. Subjectively, I think it's probably overrated. I think the numbers look a little too good. But again, I kind of just put the numbers in and they kind of come out how they want. I think Honduras is too hot. But you know, they're sort of in this range right here in terms of the scale. They're in the 40 to 70 kind of area there. They're not great, but they're not.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and it's certainly better than they were, all of them, especially now that the wars have settled. Nicaragua, of course, has the highest variation over time because during the Sandinistas it went down, and then post-Sandinista, if you can call it that, you know, since everything settled down, they've come back up. You can see Botswana and South Africa down here, and reasonably well. Generally, English Africa is better than French Africa. If you think about English East Africa doing better than French West Africa. Okay, so that's fun. So the next step then is to, okay, now we have the measure. We have a measure that tells us, and it's a crude measure. I don't want to, you know, don't argue about tenths of points here, but it's a crude measure that gives us, roughly speaking, an idea that the blues look more like Adam Smith and the reds look more like Karl Marx, and then you've got a continuum in between. And the idea is that if Smith is right, then countries that look in blue are going to come out better than countries that look in red. And you already know what's going to happen, right? Because you can look at the map and you know what the blue countries are, and so forth. So, oh, I forgot, I got to do one thing. Before I do that, take everything I said, get that. We do have a time series, so you can actually track how the index is done over time. And we're seeing more freedom, although it's leveled off in the 2000s. The 80s and 90s were a real period of liberalization around the world. Tax rates fell, tariff rates fell, money and inflation stabilized worldwide, just in area privatizations around the world. So in country after country, in a whole bunch of different areas, we saw this sort of market revolution in the 80s and 90s. Now it's certainly leveled off, but it's kind of even drifted up a little bit since then. Yeah?
How is the current economic issue in the United States going to affect this scale?
It's not going to be good for the United States' rating, I'm sure. Now, one thing to note is that the numbers I'm showing are 2006, the most recent numbers I have. I'm kind of like a physicist. I look 2 light years in the past. But I'm pretty sure that a couple years from now, when I get around to doing the current period, it's not going to be good. I mean, the government spending numbers are just insane. I mean, the kinds of numbers that are being thrown around right now, they're all on budget numbers, so I'll pick them up. I mean, we're talking about, we're not going to go to Swedish levels of tax and spending, but we're going to, if the current gap between us and Sweden is this, we're going to close that gap by about 50% if Obama, and what I'm hearing, if the numbers that I'm hearing are going on. So I think the U.S. numbers will take a hit.
How about, I mean, will it even out globally though, because we have such a large impact on other
Well,
markets?
I don't know. I don't think most of the world is going to make the same kinds of radical policy changes that we're seeing talked about here. I don't think so. I think it's going to be a hit for us. The U.S. is already taking a hit. We were second in the world in 2000, and we're 8th in the most recent edition. And I blame George Bush for that. But, yeah.
If this is the economic freedom rating, if that's sort of an aggregate, do you have, or have you looked at any data as to living standards or wealth in comparison to, okay.
Thank you. I'll pay you later for that. Yeah, actually, this is why we did the project. I mean, I think actually measuring economic freedom is a worthwhile project in and of its own right. Just because measuring things is fun. But at the end of the day, the reason we wanted to have this measure of economic freedom is to ask ourselves and answer questions like, are places that are blue richer than places that are red? And what about the shades of yellows and blues and greens in between? So to answer that, I've got a series of charts that'll help us answer that or look at that. And this is all low-tech stuff. If you want to run fancy regressions, if anybody's taken econometrics, that's great. You can ramp this up and do it econometrically with all sorts of control variables, and you'll get the same answers I'm going to show here. Yes,
A
sir.
suggestion for revising this, right now they're all in sort of purple-blue. We should put the one on right in blue and the one on left in red.
You're probably right. I guess I should. Yeah, actually. I think actually our map does it that way. We have a map that's when it gets up.
Carry through.
That requires PowerPoint skills. That's good though. Someone complained that I'm not using quartile right, some mathematician, but I don't know. To me, quartiles are 20% grouping. So this is the top 20%, this is the second, 23rd, 25, and this is the bottom 25% group.
John, you want to tell him?
Don't.
I
don't know. Whatever. Yeah. All right. This is the most frequent quintile or quartile, and about $31,000 the average income. And as you go down, it's about 1/9 as high and the lowest, and it's a nice step. When I was a student in the 80s, this is something that my liberal friends, my socialist friends, would not have conceded. It was actually considered an open question as to whether or not market-oriented societies would be or would not be richer than planned societies. This was a debatable question 25 years ago. Now, students your age are probably going, everybody knows market societies are richer than planned societies. But I can tell you, I was there, that was a question that we seriously had to debate. People really thought that, no, if you do more government planning, we'll have a richer society. They really thought that. Well, it's not true. It's not so, empirically. Okay? So I think that's kind of nicely settled. And most people don't go around making claims that, heavy socialism and planning is going to make a society richer. That's not an argument that carries intellectual currency. Even Obama, as much of a commie as I think he is, I haven't heard him say, we need national industrial planning. He said we need higher taxes. He's not really talking about the kind of heavy-handed socialist nationalization type things that we seriously considered as recently as 20 years ago as serious intellectual pursuits. With respect to growth, it's a little harder to show because the growth process is more complicated. There are other variables that matter. You do see a somewhat upward trend, mostly driven by the fact that the lowest 25% of the economic freedom world have very low growth rates. And then after that, though, it's pretty much the same. If you do a more sophisticated econometric study, though, it's very clear that economic freedom, and particularly changes in the freedom rating, if you go from a low rating to a high rating, if you go from like a 4 to a 6, you'll get a big growth punch. And so I just have really a way too long quote here from a guy named Dehaan, Jacob Dehaan. He's from Holland. He surveyed the literature, and the punchline is that all the studies out there show that economic freedom is good for growth. Actually, he says none of the studies show it's bad for growth. I don't like double negatives. So what he meant to say is all of the studies out there, some 24 studies that he looked at, show that economic freedom is good for growth. So They're richer and they're growing faster, is the bottom line. Countries that are blue are richer and growing faster relative to countries that are red. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about how, at least in America, we saw when we started having a lot of economic problems, which I personally